Ladies and gentlemen, it's really a great honor for me to deliver this 9th Buch Memorial Lecture today. It's an honor indeed to have such an esteemed person who has dedicated his life starting from a very small assignment and making it a practical and devoting his life for the people of Madhya Pradesh, for the people of India, and I would say lots of things that can be learned for the people of the entire world. So my homage to him on this, his birthday today. I have come from all the way from the Himalayas today down here to the heart of India, Madhya Pradesh, Bhopal. It's a great opportunity for me to tell the story of the Himalayas to the people who have not been exposed so much on the realities of what is happening to such an important global asset, which is not only affecting people living in the Himalayas and people living in the basins of the Himalayas, but to all the nations, 8 nations which was mentioned here earlier, who is sharing this mountain system, including India and all the other countries who are not sharing in South Asia, as well as, I think, the entire world. You will know why it is a global asset as I move forward. Today, I have decided to talk about the sustainable development in a sense, not only for the Himalayas, for the entire planet. So here, the talk is, although focusing on the Himalayan region, and it's also focusing on how we can develop resilience. So it's resilience of the mountain people, but people who are directly affected by them, their resilience. So it's much, much broader than Himalaya. I think that is the relevance of me coming to Bhopal and giving this talk. So it also impacts people all over the world and all over India and Asia. So let me start with the introduction. I mean, if we are talking about the Hindu Kush Himalayan region, we should know what's the mountain systems in the world, and then what is the Indian context in terms of the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. So looking at this map, the current population of the world is around 8 billion, and 1 billion, 1/8 of the population lives in the mountains in this world. So if we look at the terrestrial area, it is 22%. Remaining are the ocean. And in that 22%, 25% of the biodiversity, terrestrial biodiversity, comes from the mountain. And more importantly, 50% of the global biodiversity hotspots are located in the mountains. And importance of mountains, 80% of the food which is coming from 20 plant species, 6 have originated in mountains. So, but mountains haven't received enough attention, enough investment, and now you will know what is happening to the mountains because we have not given enough attention and investment. So let's look into the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. This is how it looks from this satellite. When I was collaborating with NASA, one of the astronauts, he comes to Kathmandu, and during his talk, he tells, when I cross Earth, at one place in the Earth, I can see from the satellite nakedly, and I can, with the naked eyes, and I can tell this is this place. This is the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. You can see how magnanimous it is in terms of its physical character, but in terms of culture, in terms of ecosystem services, also it is equally providing such services to the global planet. That's why it's also known as a global asset. Now, importantly, this was also mentioned earlier, we know 2 poles. This is also known as the third pole, the importance. Why it is third pole? Apart from the 2 poles, most of the frozen water is found here. That's why it's also called third pole. And it is also known as water tower of Asia. And you will see why it is water tower of Asia. And this is really important in terms of natural resources, nature. This is a very important region, biodiversity-wise also very important. Very importantly, also, it's a cultural hub. Now, if we look this map, the darker blue is the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. 8 countries share this. This is Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, China, India, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. But when we look at this slide, the farthermost side there is the Hindu Kush mountains. Then comes Karakoram and Pamir in Pakistan, and then Himalaya in Pakistan, and then Himalaya comes like this. We see the entire Himalayan arc, and we see the Tibetan plateau. This entire region, different mountain systems, right, and then we see the Chittagong hill tracts of Bangladesh. And some of you may be surprised to know Myanmar is also having glaciers. That is the first finding about 20 years ago by Isimod only. So high mountain areas in northern Myanmar has glaciers, which I think very few people knew earlier. So this is a very important area. Now, if we look at this slide, before that 240 million people live in the mountains. 10 major rivers originate here. When I say 10 major rivers, Ganga is one. You can know how many river tributaries are merging in Ganga. All of the rivers in Nepal, they merge in Ganga. So you can imagine 10 major rivers. So about 1.9 billion people, 200 crore log rehte hain in the basins of the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. If we look at mountains, it's only 240 million people. But when we look at the downstream, that's why upstream, downstream relationship. Mountains are linked with downstream very much. 1.9 billion people. So it's highly populated area. Much of our policies are made in big capitals, which is very far away from mountains, whether it is Beijing or whether it is Islamabad or Delhi. Or Dhaka. So what I am trying to say is that what is happening in mountains, unless we are able to educate people elsewhere, we will not get the types of inputs, results, investment. That is the issue. So the policies are made elsewhere. So large number of people who are living in the downstream, they are not mountain people, they are not in mountains, but they are very much at high risk because something is happening to the mountains, and I'll tell you what is happening to the mountains. Before going to that, another very important part of the mountains is culturally mountains are very rich. 1,000 living languages are still there, but our assessment shows that 70% of them are threatened. They might be lost. And with that, lots of traditional knowledge systems, which they have come from generation to generation, will be also lost. So the rich culture is there, but if we don't do or take actions, very soon those knowledge systems, those cultures might vanish. So that is also a very, very important element when we talk about development, sustainable development. So looking at this region alone, 1/4, so 200 crores means about 2 billion people who are in downstream and this region, they are directly impacted by the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. So it's a huge number of the, if you see, it's a small area, small region if you look at the planet, but 1/4 of the humanity is directly impacted. And the food which is produced in this river basin caters to 3 to 4 billion people's food security. That means almost half of humanity is impacted by this region. We have to really understand and project the profile. See, everybody talks about Amazon being the lungs of the planet. I would say Himalaya is the pulse of the planet. What happens here impacts the entire world. So this is the type of deliberation we have to do to bring attention to the Hindu Kush Himalayan region, and it's one of the most conflicting region. I will tell you how we were able to collaborate. So India and Pakistan relation, you know, India and China. So in spite of all these, we are able to work in these countries so nicely because of science as an entry point, science, not the politics of science, but science for development. I think this is what is critical and important. Now, let's see how India is poised within the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. So in this Hindu Kush Himalayan region, you can see the Indian Himalayan region. Very clearly 9 states, 2 union territories, 2 states like North Bengal, Darjeeling and areas, and then Assam, they fall in this. Interestingly, 16% of India is the Indian Himalayan region. It's not much. Only 86 million people live in the Indian Himalayan region, which is only 6% of India's population. But if we look at the Hindu Kush Himalayan region, Indian Himalayan region is only 11%. But the population in the Indian Himalayan region is 36% of the Hindu Kush Himalayan. So if we look and compare with the mountains, we are the most populated mountain amongst the 8 countries. That means resources, management, everything. So it's lots of human influenced. And I'm not talking about those people who are visiting the Himalayan region. Large floating population go to the Himalayas and resources are used. So those population I am not including. Since Madhya Pradesh is known for forest, maybe I should give some data about the forest. The Indian Himalayan region actually contributes to India 36% of India's forest. So they are in the Himalayan region. 44% of angiosperms are from the Himalayan region. 60% of endemic plants which are found in India are coming from the Himalayan region. 63% of water budget of India comes from the Himalayan region. All of glaciers and alpine region are from the Himalayan region. So this is a very, very important region for India, as well as the 8 countries and the world. So now, geologically it is fragile. I think when we talk of sustainable development, we cannot do much of the infrastructure, all other things, unless we look at the fragility of that region. So why that is fragile? I think all of you know the Himalaya was formed after the continental drift, and the peninsular India moved and then came, and in the Tayat Sea started hitting the Eurasian plate, Tibetan plateau, that plate, and then Himalaya started emerging. So that process is still on, and you have been hearing last 1 week, there were papers, science finding that Himalaya is still rising, and Everest is rising the faster. I think this was there last week. The issue is not just the erosion, it is the pressure in where there is lots of this tectonic pressure is moving and creating that pressure. So that pressure area, Himalayan arc, is the fault area. That means lot of energy is accumulated, and this is the most seismic zone in the world. And you can see very clearly what are the potential threats in terms of the earthquakes. See 8.68, all over you will see 8 Richter scale, danger is there. So what type of infrastructure, what type of development you want to have? I can tell you these predictions are very accurate. The purple one, 7.4 Richter scale, already happened in Nepal in 2015. I was there, I faced it. They had predicted this in 2005. This slide is of 2005. You can see it was already predicted, and it happened. They didn't know when it is going to happen, but it has already happened. So anytime, anywhere, very near accuracy, earthquakes can happen. So in that context, what are our development plan for the Himalayan region? So this is one key thing which we have to keep in mind. That is a bigger question, bigger issue for us. But there are other issues which may not be easily visible. So I want to bring those invisible issues of for sustainability. So what are they? And these invisible issues have come out of our exercise, engaging 350 scientists from all over the world, 80% of them from this region, and 30% of them were women. And from 2014 to 2019, we did this comprehensive assessment, and it was published. I'll talk about that later on. So some of the findings which you are seeing are actually coming for the first time as baseline for this region from that comprehensive assessment. So let's look at poverty. So poverty is one of the indicators for sustainable development, and we know in sustainable development goals this is there. But when we talk about mountains, I think just poverty is not enough. It's the multi-dimensional poverty. It's not just the economic poverty, it's energy poverty, it's health poverty, it is food security related poverty. All these are poverty. And all the mountain regions in these 8 countries, wherever there is not full mountains, plains and mountains, then you will see mountain region is more poorer than the other. So this is one issue which we have to really see. Mountains are more poorer in terms of multi-dimensional poverty. Now, looking into the food security, 30% of the population in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region doesn't have the full food security. They are insecure. More worrying, our Prime Minister also talks about New India, the young India. See, 50% of malnutrition from the Himalayan region. Out of that, 1/5 to 1/2 of the children less than 5 are stunted. Means, what can you expect from people who are stunted? They will not have proper growth. So our future for the mountain people in terms of young generation is questionable here. Then we talk about energy poverty. Energy poverty is very, very, we say the Hindu Kush Himalayan region has 500 gigawatt. But still, 80% of the rural people doesn't have access to clean energy. And much of the big structures in these countries are coming as big dams. I think small is beautiful, big is very much harmful for the mountains. So with that context, we have to have a different paradigm in terms of energy security, energy poverty, how we are going to address to the mountains. Another big issue, this morning also in IIFM, when I was having interaction, people talked about out-migration. You know, out-migration from the mountains, people are moving out. I have seen in the Eastern Himalaya and the Western Himalaya difference. Just to give you example of Uttarakhand, almost many villages in high altitude are ghost villages. Means everybody has left and moved to different cities in India. And if you go to the Eastern Himalayan part, women are going out for jobs and they are leaving old and young and others at home. So the whole social paradigm of the societies in the mountains are changing because of out-migration. How we are going to address this issue. Then of course biodiversity loss, I'll talk about that in details. So I am already coming to that. Importance of biodiversity and changing paradigm. So when you look at Himalaya, 2 things quickly comes. One is loss of biodiversity, another one is water. So I'm going to take these 2 resources very much. That's why how the biodiversity is impacted, because I think Madhya Pradesh is also interested lots in biodiversity. There are 4 global hotspots. And if we look at the Indian Himalayan region, 2 hotspots, Indo-Burman and Himalayan. Northeast India part, and then Arunachal is in the Himalaya part. So you can see Sikkim are in Himalaya. So these are the 2 global hotspots. And this region is still unknown. In 20 years, I think in 10 years, almost 351 new species have been discovered only from the Eastern Himalayan region. So lots of research input, expeditions have to happen. This is one big question. 60 to 85% of the people are still dependent on their subsistence livelihood from the biodiversity. And what biodiversity we have, if you compare 15th century, only we are working with 70 to 80%. Means they are lost. We have only 20 to 30%. And out of that, with the current biodiversity loss, 1/4 of that endemic species are going to be lost by 2100. This is also the finding from the assessment. So clearly shows our action on biodiversity has to be really enhanced. So in the history, globally, what has been the paradigm change? Even for Madhya Pradesh, very clearly, we started conservation in early as 1930 and moved until 1980 as charismatic species, big fauna, and like that we have started conserving species conservation approach. Then slowly from 1970 onwards, the habitat conservation and also protected area management concept started coming, and then we started integrating people in the management from 1980 onwards to 2002, buffer zone management, community-based management approach, and then we came into landscape approach and ecosystem approach from 1998 to 2020, and now we are in a new dimension of the paradigm, that is multifunctional landscapes. Means it is not just the forest, it's not just the watershed, there are many functions of a given bigger landscapes. So, and these landscapes are socio-ecological landscapes, means people and nature together has to be looked into as a system to improve, to manage, and that is quite relevant for the mountains. But very importantly, I said 60% of India's endemic species are coming from the Himalayan region. And you can see the endemic species means a species which is found only in this region. If they are lost from this, this is lost from the planet Earth. So that is why it is very, very important. And if you look at this, very alarmingly, Himalayan Indo-Burman plants, so almost 50% in Indo-Burman and Himalaya, almost 30% of the species are endemic in terms of plant. And if you look at the other groups also, you will see quite significant. But in terms of really amphibians, this is the same trend. So it's quite interesting and very important. Now let's move on to the drivers of change, and one of the biggest driver of change apart from the population growth is the climate change and how it is impacting. See, in Paris, we agreed that we would like to keep this world 1.5 degree. We were negotiating for mountains, and based on that, we accepted and we wanted to do. Very importantly for the Hindu Kush Himalayan region, one thing which we have to remember is the temperature rise is amplified by elevation dependent warming. As we go higher, the warming is faster. And we agreed that, and recently in 2023 when we were doing another assessment, 1.5 degree we wanted to have increase by 2100. Unfortunately, by 2030 we are reaching 1.5 degree. That means it is really alarming. If we have agreed 1.5, that means 2.1 degree, much. Hindu Kush Himalayan region is too hot for 1.5. The increase as average is 2.1. Western part is 2.3 and eastern is 1.9. And with the current emission, if we look at the base of 1976 and like that, with that projection, current emission by 2100, some of the areas will have 5 degrees centigrade rise. So that means it's a huge, huge situation. What we see right now may not exist. Even after the other generation will be able to see it. So that is the problem. And how it looks, you can see the greater warming right now you see in the Western Himalayan region, and then less in the Eastern Himalayan region. So this is very clearly, distinctly we are seeing, but there are other factors. Pollutions are coming, the development, even the Central and Eastern Himalaya is warming more. This is the global temperature rise impact, but if we look local factors, pollutants actually reaching to the mountains, that is also causing lots of problem. Seeing is believing. Maybe you may be thinking, oh, they have done research and noted, but what is actually is happening? 1921 Mallory's expedition from UK went towards the northern side of the Everest. This is Everest from the Tibet side, and they have taken this picture. Please look at this picture, and exactly after 90 years, David Bashir, who was working with us for ICIMOD, he went and he has taken this. Look at this slide, how much of the glaciers were there. You can see all of these glaciers have gone, and now you can see glacial lakes have been formed. So the water which are supposed to be recharged in green period in our rivers are going to be a big, big issue. So I said 1.5 degree world by 2100, 1/3 of the glaciers will vanish. But with the current emission, 2/3 of the glaciers. Already we are seeing it is reaching. When I talk about the glacial lake outburst floods, I will tell you what is the situation. So what the impact of such water resources, because of temperature, very much we'll lose lots of ice. Then people living next to the glaciers, they are going to be impacted immediately. Then we are also not sure, there is uncertainty in precipitation, air circulation is changing. So water availability is going to be a huge issue. I'll not talk about this point here, but I'll elaborate this very nicely in another slide. This slide. So look at this whole region. Water available for agriculture from glacier and snow melt. If you look at the Indus, the upper, which is for the western part, the blue is the water which is coming from glacier melt. It is most dominant. 80 to 90% of water in Pakistan, Ladakh, Kashmir, all those areas come from there, and they are dependent totally. And if you look at mountain watersheds, like your small hillocks mountains here in Madhya Pradesh or Himalayan region, so that is less for Indus, and then groundwater and water from the plains is still less. But if you go to the Ganga, our glaciers matter very less. It's only 5 to 10%, but most, around 40% actually comes from mountain watershed. The forest in the mountains, they capture water, and then the water flow in the rivers. So that is the mountain watershed, if you can see. And the third one down below, if you look at this, there is in Ganga basin lots of you will see water, groundwater used in agriculture. Then it is coming from groundwater, which is also recharged because of the mountain watersheds. So it's recharging actually takes place. So it's very important to us, for everybody to have a planning which is science-based planning, understand this at the macro level, then action at the regional level. So that is very, very critical. And if you look at the Brahmaputra, today also I was reading, lots of people are talking about Brahmaputra. See, the uppermost part, which is only 20 to 30%, 20%, 25% is coming from glaciers. So the China part of the water, how much precipitation there is there in Tibetan Plateau? Maximum 300, 200 millimeters a year. But the water which is coming in that Brahmaputra in the Tibet, almost 1200 kilometers from Kailas region, Mansarovar region to near Arunachal, it is not that much volume. But there is a very dam and water loss. But actually water in the Brahmaputra basin which is coming is rainfall and watershed water discharged from the forests and landscapes of the Indian part. So I think majority of water is coming from the watersheds, and then there is some groundwater. I think these are very important science related information, good for regional policies, regional thinking, and making a good argument. So the communities next to the glaciers, they are already suffering. This is Ladakh, Leh. So you can see they are suffering so much. Then climate change, what is another very big impact? You can see with time how the rice yield will reduce by 15% to climate change. 15% of rice yield means a lot of food security issues for the people living in this region. So it's very, very worrying to me. And you can see by the end of the century, almost for the entire Brahmaputra and Ganga basin, 15% decrease because of the climate change in food production, rice production will happen. Another big impact that I see in Uttarakhand, this is a slide from there, 1 degree change of rise in temperature actually completely changed the oak forest. When oak forest means all biodiversity related, the entire structure, ecological structure has changed. Just 1 degree rise. And we are talking about 1.5 degree already by 2030. And with the current emission, it might go up to 4 or 5 degree. So you can imagine the quality of forest, all those are going to be really impacted. Now, big discussion is on water-induced disasters. So you have seen glacial lakes formed, all these dams. So let me tell you what is happening in terms of water. So the disaster, if you look at, so we have floods, which is the most important disasters for this region. We have flash floods, droughts, landslides, glacial lake outburst floods. I'll give you 2 examples later on, and you'll see it very clearly what is happening. You can see how the bigger circle means those areas where the disaster numbers have increased very quickly. More importantly, if you look at this graph, 1980 to 1990, another decade, 1990 to 2000, 2000 to 2010. If you see the number of events is the lowest, dark blue, which is increasing little bit. But if you look at the next one, light blue, that is the people killed. So you can see how much more people in 20 years, 30 years time it has increased. So more people are dying because of the floods very much. And yellow is the affected number of people, and also because of huge infrastructure investment, you are seeing from 1980 to 1990 only a small fraction economic loss. But now you can see substantial amount of economic loss because of these disasters. You will see some example by eyes. Another important thing, since I'm talking about 8 countries, regional cooperation is very, very important. And with this slide, you can see globally, transboundary rivers, globally, 10% are transboundary, means a river which is crossing multiple countries or 2 countries at least is a transboundary river. So only 10% rivers are transboundary rivers. But what happens is that casualty, 33% of those rivers, casualties are coming from transboundary rivers. And around 60% people are displaced from transboundary. That clearly shows we are not collaborating, we are not talking between the countries or sharing the information and data. So this is why the regional cooperation is fundamental for the security, for the life of the people living in those river basins. So the discussion has to change. Now, if you look at this, this is very, very worrying. So we started working 1990 to 2010. In 20 years, number of increased glaciers, almost 1,000. So by in 20 years, by 2010, it was 4,200. In 20 years, increased by 1,000 in number. You know what is the current number of glacier lakes identified? 7,000. In last 15 years, 3,000 more lakes have been formed in mountains. More lakes means more risk. So that is very much. And one of the example of glacial lake outburst floods, this is Kedarnath, 2013. In Kedarnath, the lake was burst, and you can see what is happening in downstream here, a very much Rishikesh and further down. So you can imagine. And you know how much casualty? Official record is 6,000, and 6,000 is not yet found. That means 12,000 people have died in this. So you can, and how much of bridges have gone, how much of hydropower projects have been impacted. So water-induced disaster, and water-induced disasters are coming because of the climate change, because of the rise of temperature very much. I will show you one more example that happened last year in Sikkim, and this year also we already are having. So last year you can see in October, see in Lonak glaciers, there was a landslide, and there was an avalanche, some say, and then because of that flood started, and you can see the flood is traveling. And this is next to the Lonak, little bit below. Earlier, such a beautiful Chungthang Dam, totally devastated, and lots of people in the downstream, including Tista and up to down below. Even Bangladesh, it has reached. So the casualty was less, 82, they were prepared, and but if you see number of people displaced and the amount of economic loss, so you can imagine, I was saying one is the seismic zone, another one because of climate change, such things. So our infrastructure development, our development approach has to change. It has to be a different model. Another example, this is Nepal, Dudh Kosi, which flows in very much to Bihar. You have seen last week, all the rivers of Nepal were swelling and Nepal were having problem, but the impact was totally Bihar. That is what is upstream-downstream relationship. We have to understand and we have to cooperate and work. So here, when this was happening, already Bihar was informed by Nepal government and people were already put into the safer place. But luckily, this was then, it didn't breach. So there was a landslide, the river was blocked, and you can see how much of water is being actually accumulated. And then all of a sudden, when it breaches, then it causes a big flood. So there are various ways, means of causing floods and disasters downstream. We need to understand and work very clearly. So we are seeing 1/3 the disasters are flood already in this region, and it may double by 2100. That was our assessment few years ago. That was 2019 done in, but I can tell you it's not double, it might be triple or even more, which we are seeing now. So another big thing which is coming, this is not Hindu Kush Himalayan region, but I wanted to give you what is a cloud burst. Many people don't know about the cloud burst. So the land is heating. In the Himalayan region, heat wave, if we see, is to be only in the Gangetic plain, but now the heat wave is actually piercing in the mountains, going much further. So when there is a heating of the land, lots of moisture when it comes, it accumulates like that. And it is not able to fall because of the heat conversion there. It holds, then all of a sudden, it cannot hold, then it pours like this. And that is 100 millimeter in 1 hour or more is the cloud burst. It's not the lightning. Many people say, oh, there's a lot of lightning cloud burst. It's not like that. In 1 hour, if the rainfall is more than 100 millimeter, then it's... so now, what is happening? Last year, Himachal Pradesh, so many cloud bursts. Uttarakhand. So you'll see, we used to have cloud bursts 1 in 10 years. But we are having so many within a year. So this is the problem of also heating which is taking place in the mountains. Now, all these good things, importance, then some of the challenges and risks and danger. So what are the transformative actions we need to do? I think that is the very last part of my presentation to tell you. As a person, he was also telling, who was introducing about the region earlier, he said these areas are inaccessible. Unfortunately, we don't have enough monitoring system and we don't know much about the high mountain areas. So we need to really have a good monitoring, and it means forecast, early warning system, but also we have to really see physically those glacial lakes and monitor them. And it's very simple. In case of Bhutan, we observed there was a lake which was at very high risk, and with the military we worked, and then very clear siphonage to a river, and then lake was level was put down or lowered. So there are technologies, even in Nepal we did. It is possible. It's a question of monitoring and then doing. And I'm very happy to at least one part. In the northern part, there is a large workforce, that is army, who can be used for such things. They will be willing to do it. So it's a question of doing it. But monitoring part has to be done by a scientific institution, and then action can be done by others. Another important thing, making information traveling faster than flood waters. So what is starting up there? It has to, we have very good, very simple, it looks a very sophisticated system. We have a sophisticated system developed, but we have also community system. Community early warning system, very simple technology from upper village. When it starts, the small rivers which is feeding starts rising, they will inform the lower communities by mobile. And we have won UN prize also for such a small innovative technology which we developed in Assam. Then it was also used in BR and like that, not with the type of floods which happen now. This is too huge for that. For such things, we should have this type of sophisticated system. And the problem is that we have the system, but still the countries are not cooperating so much to give their lean time of data. The disaster time they will like to give, but lean time. So unless you have a full analysis, this is very difficult. So that is, these are the constraints. So another solution, what is the solution? So there are river basins. We talk about only mountains, or we talk about only something happening. So if we look at this whole, we have to have a river basin planning. So what happened in Tista basin in Sikkim? So if people were connected in West Bengal, North Bengal and Bangladesh, then situation have been done. The planning has to be done in that way, and you can see different types of ecosystems are there, farmlands, cities, coast. So it's connecting Himalaya to ocean, H2O, water is connecting. Let's plan water right from glaciers to the ocean. And in that, bring all the departments, concerned ministries, institutions, first do technically and then with the policy planning. I think that is very important. Now, people in the Himalaya, they also need a sustainable livelihood. So let me bring the livelihoods approach. There are many niche products in the mountains, they need to be exploited. So one of the niche product is large cardamom, very much. But large cardamom started suffering so much from disease and because of climate change. So if I am talking about resilience, in the title I have given resilience. So of course disaster-related resilience are now livelihood resilience, if I have to see resilience. Then diversification. If a farmer is dependent in one crop, then if something happens to that, the farmer is then doomed. But for large cardamom, they are combined with kiwi fruit. Then honeybee for pollination, but also for their nutrition and income, honeybee was combined. Then spice tourism, homestays, so people who used to come and they started. So the earning of a farmer then is diversified. And large cardamom itself, value added, value chain, marketed, and then it brings better income. So the answer for the livelihoods is diversification to bring resilience. So anything when we are thinking farm, even here, so resilience, we have to diversification. One good example on niche product. So Bhutan had totally banned this Yarsagumba. It's a cordyceps plant. We call it Himalayan gold. You know how much it is? 1 kilogram, only 80,000 US dollar. So it's really much more expensive than a gold. 80,000, and that is, I'm telling you, even more expensive now. And at the farmer's place in Uttarakhand, when they are collected, they get 5 lakhs to 8 lakhs rupees for 1 kilogram good quality on the spot. And in the international market, it is so much. So you can imagine. But in Bhutan, they were not allowing the farmers to collect. I'm telling you the story of 2004. So then I asked one of the PhD students from Bhutan who wanted to work on Yarsagumba to really work on sustainable harvesting of Yarsagumba, and we influenced the government to allow to do sustainable harvesting. Before that, the Tibetans were coming and collecting Yarsagumba from high altitude areas. The entire the high alpine area, alpine to subalpine ecotone was destroyed by Tibetans, and because the locals were not allowed, it was illegal for them, banned, so they were not taking care. So the high altitude areas of Bhutan were getting destroyed, degraded like anything. So with this policy, they allowed, and after that you can see they found it, and local people have been designated to collect in a deferred type of collection every 4 years in a given area, and you can see the products are in the market. So the country, because of one good science, good practice and policy change, such a big impact can happen. So I am just giving you, for a small one plant, one caterpillar plant, such a big thing. Like that, you can make a real difference globally. Another very important issue in the Himalayan region, when we talk about resilience, talk about transformation, is, we know in the world, when you go to the Andes, they say the llamas are the iconic animal. If you go to the Arctic Circle, you say, okay, reindeers are there. For Himalaya, it's the yaks. Yaks are found only in the Himalayas, nowhere in the world. So yaks are, but there, because of the artificial border after Tibetan War 1959, then all yaks which were moving across the borders, they were stopped because of the borders, and the yak genetic resources is squeezed and it is degrading. For that, we need to see how this very important keystone species in high altitude areas, genetic material can be improved. So we did a yak exchange between those, and exchange by the farmers, government only facilitated. So this is what has to happen. So the bulls from Bhutan came to Sikkim and went to Nepal, and there is a breeding taking place, so the different genetic material, the gene improvement. They are very simple. You don't have to have a sophisticated biotechnological lab to do such things. These are more practical and more actually acceptable and possible on the ground. So that is very important. Now last part, few slides from my side. See, the integrated approach for sustainability. It is very true for Madhya Pradesh. It is true for India. So lots of research they do, and they are in their box. They publish and vanish. Many people make policies. They do policies on hearsaying, and they don't. So the approach has to be integrated. So in this, I think evidence-based information knowledge, which is generated, has to be used in the policy process, and that can be only done if there is a partnership between policymakers and the researchers through a think tanking process. I think Dr. Buch tried to do that very much to make things happen. So very much we have to bring policymakers and the research together, good dialogue, and based on that, then the policy has to be formed. There are many examples I can give. I was giving those examples in IFM during the interaction. So that is possible. So sustainable solutions can only come like that. Another important thing is traditional knowledge systems, communities' participation, and so the practice part. From research, good practices come, they need to be tested, and really the communities have to own and take it further. So similarly, the policies which can really make impact and scaling up by the communities. It has to be scaling up by the policy. Policies have to see what scale we can really take. So this is very, very important, and you will see my last slide, how policy, research and practice can make difference on the ground. That is my last slide for all of you. But before that, I have to tell you science to action. To make science to action, so policy and practice are equally important. So what we did, I talked about the Hindu Kush Himalaya assessment. So I have driven that assessment, 350 people, 5 years, so much of resources, but we didn't leave the assessment as just academic, scientific exercise. So after 3 years, out of 5 years, 3 years, when the data started showing the trends and like that, we started working with these 8 countries and started sharing the findings, and we developed the HK's call to action very much. So this is a regional call for action based on the science, co-developed with the governments of 8 countries. And to make it possible, then on 15th October 2020, we organized ministerial summit, and based on that, all 8 countries, in spite of the COVID, in spite of India and China, actually at the borders really struggling in Ladakh and Pakistan, we were able to sign this declaration, and this declaration is taken forward and it is being put into action. So the science has been put into action through a regional cooperation, and investment is also coming through a regional mechanism and also from the countries. So this is what is very, very important. And in this assessment, we also looked into one very important thing. That is, if the 8 countries stop, we fight, and we don't cooperate, the downhill. So almost all these, whatever we are seeing, will disappear very quickly. Your glaciers, your forest, all those, and the impact downstream will be very huge. But if we try to do whatever we're doing, little bit of projects here and there, so it might be a little bit better. So that is muddling through. But we want to be more proactive, and we want to have a prosperous HKH in the Kush Himalayan region. And what came out was bottom-up approach is what people need, what the region needs. It's not somebody's thought from Europe or US or from elsewhere putting here. It's the people's requirement has to come. But the investment should come from the external world. Why? Because we in the Himalayan region are either zero carbon or negative carbon. Bhutan is negative carbon. Others are not contributing to global carbon. But we are punished. So the investment has to come globally, but then definitely the plan has to be the bottom-up approach very much. And there has to be lots of local and national cooperation and then regional cooperation that needs to happen. For that, then with our Niti Aayog, we worked and we wanted to organize the Indian Himalayan region simultaneously when this assessment was completed. So Himalayan States Regional Council under the leadership of Niti Aayog was formed. We prepared 5 major reports for Niti Aayog for the states to implement on tourism, on shifting cultivation, on skills development, on data sharing. So on these 5 reports, then we have National Mission on Sustaining Himalayan Ecosystem, National Mission on Himalayan Studies. So now we have vibrant village program by the Prime Minister of India. 17,000 villages have been all across high altitude areas. So how we really retain people in high altitude areas. So this is how the government has started changing their paradigm and thinking for the Himalayan region because of the science, because of the visibility that we were able to bring within the Indian context. Now this is my last slide. I talked about integrated approach. I said research, policy, and practice. This is a perfect example of community forestry in Nepal. In 1970s, there is a book by Bruno Messerli and the Himalayan dilemma. So the Himalayan, so much of middle hill of forest was totally destroyed, totally degraded, all logging, and it has been destroyed. And this is the global community, global experts started writing like this. And it was doomed. But in 1990s, then a concept of getting the middle hills of Nepal back through community forestry came. The institutions like ISIMOD, institutions like UN, some of them research, some of them really building capacity. And the big decision was made by policymakers. One is the research. So we brought the practice aid, good practices, all those. So that was the research part. So the technology is available, the practices are available. The government part was devolution of power to the community forest user groups. Now there are more than 15,000 community forest user groups there. So 15,000 in the middle hills. So those community forests were devolved. They started able to protect. They were able to use the forest resources by them. They were making decision with the plan with the forest department. So complete devolution. And the community user group, the people, is the practice. They actually did the work on the ground with capacity building from researchers, other institutions. So devolution power, policy, research brought all these practices, capacity building, community actually made the forest come back. And you can see such a degraded forest, 1987, 2010. We can make the Himalaya as green as this with all the ecosystem services. You can see the same place. In almost 20 years, you can see how we can restore. Now, after the last convention on biological diversity, the whole world is talking about restoration. This is restoration. So there is already a good practice. There is a good practice not at a small this level. The entire middle hills of Nepal has been greened like this. So we have to learn what has already there and try to restore. So right now in my new institution, I am promoting multifunctional landscapes and restoration of the Himalayan landscapes to have a socio-ecological balance, so that Himalaya is going back to the glory and providing all the security and the services to the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
मैं सुभाष कुमार हूँ और मेरा एक छोटा सा सवाल ये था कि ये हिमालय आपने बताया बहुत फ्रेजाइल है, तो ये फ्रेजिलिटी के बारे में थोड़ा विस्तार से जानना चाहते थे। और दूसरी चीज़ ये कि जो सारी बातें हुई है कि इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलपमेंट, रोड्स हैं या बेतहाशा टूरिज्म डेवलपमेंट जो हो रहा है पहाड़ों में, और वो भी रिवर बेसिन में और बिल्कुल फ्लड प्लेस के अंदर, तो ऐसा जो डेवलपमेंट है उसके बारे में क्या कुछ सोच बदली है कि अभी हम उसी डायरेक्शन में जा रहे हैं?
थैंक यू वेरी मच। ये बहुत अच्छा क्वेश्चन है। फ्रेजिलिटी के बारे में बताएं तो क्यों फ्रेजाइल है? हिमालय वन ऑफ द यंगेस्ट माउंटेन सिस्टम इन द वर्ल्ड। अगर आप एंडीज जाइए, कार्पेथियंस जाइए और या एपेलिचन्स जाइए, एंडीज जाइए, ये सब माउंटेन्स देखेंगे तो वर्ल्ड में हिमालय यंगेस्ट, और अभी भी ये मूव कर रहा है अगेंस्ट द ग्रेविटी, वो बढ़ रहा है। तो आपका सॉयल हुआ, हर एक चीज़ हुआ, ग्रेविटेशन हमेशा खींचता है ना, तो उस हिसाब से फ्रेजिलिटी एक तो ये है। दूसरा फ्रेजिलिटी बिकॉज ऑफ द टेक्टोनिक जो है, कभी भी हिल सकता है, कभी भी एनर्जी रिलीज हो सकता है, उस केस में जो है कि सेस्मिक जोन होने से फ्रेजिलिटी है। तीसरा, आपका एलिवेशंस इतना ज़्यादा है, आपका रिवर गॉर्जेस देखिए, इतना ऊपर से रिवर बह के आता है, तो रिवर का वाटर का फोर्स भी आपका ग्रेविटी के कारण उसी तरह से बढ़ता है। सो उसके कारण भी फ्रेजिबिलिटी है। और बहुत फ्रेजाइल है क्योंकि आपको बहुत कम सीजन मिलता है ग्रो करने के लिए। जो हाई एल्टीट्यूड में हैं उनको मुश्किल से 5 से 6 महीने मिलता है, उस समय उनको अपना लाइवलीहुड के लिए सब कुछ करना है, तो लाइवलीहुड्स का फ्रेजिलिटी वहाँ से है। और कोई भी पौधे हैं और कोई भी आप वहाँ उगाते हैं, मैं अभी थोड़ी देर में एग्जांपल दे रहा था। गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया का आपके पास सब्सिडी है एलपीजी में, हमको मार्केट में फुल प्राइस में सिलीगुड़ी में 850 रुपीज़ में एक सिलेंडर मिलता है। वही हम एक घंटा का ड्राइव में अपना घर पहुंचते हैं दार्जिलिंग करशोंग में, और वही 1150 हो जाता है। आप देख लीजिए, वो फॉरेस्ट बचा रहे हैं, सब कुछ कर रहे हैं, ऑल इकोसिस्टम सर्विस दे रहे हैं, और वही गैस जो है कि वो, क्योंकि हमारा माउंटेन स्पेसिफिक पॉलिसीज नहीं है, प्लानिंग नहीं है, वो 850 इक्विवेलेंट इज 1150 इन माउंटेन्स। टू फर्दर सब्सिडाइज दे हैव टू ऐड दिस अमाउंट in the mountains for the subsidy, and also add more for their ecosystem services or forest protection. So the people should get LPG in Karshong in 500 rupees. If that has to be respected. So we don't have a particular problem. So the fragility is for economic fragility because they are too far off, inaccessible. So, and the livelihood fragility because of the seasons. The physical fragility because of the Himalaya is still rising, rivers have high forces, so these are all causes of fragility. Yeah.
The second part was regarding the kind of development which we are.
Yeah, the development, I think what you have said, see, people know, people are aware. But see, the mountain states, they are full, but still they are not practicing. See, now, when it comes to the security, everything is then let off. Foresters are here. I am seeing very senior foresters. They start saying, okay, we can't do, it's a security. Right now, what is happening? I am talking about Himalayas. One thing is happening, all the Indian Himalayan region is made high accessible roads. So all those big forests, all those forests in high altitude areas, See, I talked about vibrant village. The livelihood part is thought, but the environment part in terms of getting access is going to destroy the environment. So how scientifically, how beautifully, how wisely we are going to do. Decision is from the top, but how we do on the ground is different. So the capacity to think of balancing nature with development is bare minimum. Although we know environment is important, but we don't have capacity to really implement that. So that is the problem. That's why they have to take really technical help. Really technical help in terms of putting them in action. But it's happening. It is happening more. Let me tell you, the roads construction, even they are going for bigger dams. China is talking about how much dams, 60,000 megawatt in Tibetan plateau. It's not 600 megawatt, 60,000 megawatt. I read this morning. So you can imagine people are thinking, already there is one which is 22,000 or something. Such huge infrastructure are developed in this region. So economic development are given priority than the environmental security, which should not be the case in the Himalayan region. Otherwise, we will be perished very much. Yeah.
भूटान ने जो ग्रास फिटनेस इंडेक्स कंसेप्ट शुरू किया है, भूटान के अलावा और किसी ने भी उसको अपनाया है या वो कितना मदद करेगा इस प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व करने में?
कौन सा क्या ये जो
ग्रास हैप्पीनेस इंडेक्स adopted by Bhutan.
Oh, gross national happiness. Okay, that is वो बहुत अच्छा इंटरेस्टिंग स्टोरी है, क्योंकि भूटान एक छोटा सा डिस्ट्रिक्ट के बराबर है, एक कंट्री. पॉपुलेशन आप देखेंगे तो 7 लाख है, और वहाँ पे जो है कि ग्रॉस नेशनल हैप्पीनेस, हमने उसमें काफ़ी अध्ययन भी किया, हम लोगों ने इंटरैक्ट किया, जिसने ये कॉन्सेप्ट लाया उनके साथ इंटरैक्शन भी किया. इट इज़ पॉसिबल इन भूटान, क्योंकि भूटान में बहुत कम लोग हैं, बहुत ज़्यादा फॉरेस्ट है उनके पास, उस हिसाब से है, और द गवर्नमेंट कैन टेक दैट. बट व्हेन इट कम्स टू बिग कंट्री लाइक इंडिया 1.4, that is one thing. The population is here is not possible. Bhutan एक फिर very closed country है, where their decisions are very much, वो उनका जो है एक तो political decision है, definitely also followed by the monastic decision made by the priests or whatever from the monastery side. It's a very much, and in that happiness is very, in Buddhist culture, they are Buddhist. The first thing is happiness. The other things come. So culturally they are inclined for this happiness. And they are trained, they are born, and they live like that. But in India, if you say somewhere in Bombay, if you say happiness, don't drive a car, don't have a filtered water. So if you start saying that, then what is the situation? So it is not applicable elsewhere. We tried. One of your officer only, you can talk to him some other day if you know him, BMS Rathore. First, his assignment in Isimod with me was to look into this gross national happiness and how that can be used in other mountain states of India and other countries. We tried, and few elements could be taken, but I think that is good for Bhutan, and I think it is not applicable elsewhere.
ये आपने कम्युनिटी फॉरेस्ट का एक एग्जांपल दिया
जी.
पूरे हिंदुस्तान में से हिंदुस्तान निकाल के आपने नेपाल से एग्जांपल दिया, तो इंडिया से एग्जांपल क्या कम्युनिटी फॉरेस्ट का नहीं मिल सकते?
इंडिया का एग्जांपल देखिए, कम्युनिटी फॉरेस्ट इंडिया में पार्टनरशिप अप्रोच में गया है, इको डेवलपमेंट कमिटीज बना, जॉइंट फॉरेस्ट मैनेजमेंट बना, सो इंडिया का. लेकिन इंडिया का जॉइंट फॉरेस्ट मैनेजमेंट और इको डेवलपमेंट जितना सक्सेसफुल नेपाल का कम्युनिटी फॉरेस्ट नहीं था. मैं तो 8 देश के बारे में बोल रहा हूँ, जो अच्छा है वो बता रहा था. तो नेपाल का बहुत अच्छा एग्जाम्पल, जो पूरा डिग्रेडेड विजिबली दिख रहा था, ग्लोबल कम्युनिटी ने किताब लिखा उस पर, उसके बाद उसको कैसे चेंज लिया, एज एन एग्जाम्पल दिया. और इंडिया में ऐसा बात नहीं है. इंडिया में आप जाइए हिमाचल उत्तराखंड में, जो ट्रेडिशनल फॉरेस्ट मैनेजमेंट इंस्टीट्यूशंस थे, दे आर वेरी इफेक्टिव. लेकिन वो इंस्टीट्यूशन का सक्सेस स्टोरी वो सेंचुरीज से चला आया हुआ है, लेकिन वो सिस्टम अब ब्रेक डाउन हो रहा है, वो सिस्टम नहीं चल रहे हैं. लोगों का जो पावर था वो भी कम हो रहा है. So the situation is very, very different, and we don't have such a project to really show. But there are restoration projects in India, wonderful. You can go in Haryana, the watershed, the first watershed project was so amazing. उसने इतना बढ़िया दिखाया. लेकिन मैं तो हिमालय के बारे में बता रहा था, इसीलिए अरण्य का नहीं बताया. Sukhumazri. So there are good examples also in India's success. But when you come to community forests, this is the example in the entire world. इसका मुकाबला का कोई और नहीं है, जिसने within 20 years whole middle hills of Nepal को completely from west to east change कर दिया. और वही चीज practice when it went to Tarai region, community forest did not work. वही नेपाल में भी, बिकॉज वहाँ पे जो है कि कमर्शियल फार्मिंग है, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ कमर्शियल फार्मिंग इन तराई दैट कॉन्सेप्ट डिडंट वर्क. सो इट हैज़ टू बी रीजन स्पेसिफिक, कॉन्टेक्स्ट स्पेसिफिक, द प्लानिंग हैज़ टू बी डन लाइक दैट.
श्रीनिवास रिटायर्ड फॉरेस्ट ऑफिसर. सर, आप कम्युनिटीज की बात कर रहे थे, तो लद्दाखी कम्युनिटीज क्लाइमेट चेंज और अनसस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट को लेकर काफ़ी एजुकेटेड है, बट डिसीजन मेकर्स आर नॉट विलिंग टू लिसन टू देम. इसका कोई सॉल्यूशन होगा?
ऐसी बात नहीं है कि नेशनल लीडर्स वो तो समझ तो रहे हैं, सुन भी रहे हैं, लेकिन यही है कैपेसिटी का प्रॉब्लम है. हम क्या सोचते हैं उसको कैसे एक्शन में डालते हैं ना, ऐसी बात नहीं है. हाईएस्ट लेवल में सी our Prime Minister, he committed in 2015 for 1.5 degree. One of the first decision which he made while after coming from there in India, I was still in EC mode, was to start a energy efficiency bureau in Delhi. And that bureau with the technical people, how we can convert and get better energy or safer energy. It started from 2015 itself. The decision is made, but how bureau is functioning, we don't know how to translate those policy decisions into action with the right spirit and right vision. I think that is the problem. The capacity is a huge problem in this country in terms of translating policy decisions into actions and make it happen. तो community का बहुत से examples हैं ऐसे जो डिसीशंस वो है हुआ है, एंड दैट डिसीशंस आर नॉट एक्चुअली इम्प्लीमेंटेड. स्पिरिट है, विज़न भी थोड़ा बहुत है, लेकिन उसको इम्प्लीमेंट करने का बहुत बड़ा आई थिंक चैलेंज है इस कंट्री में. सो मैं तो अभी सब बोल रहा है, मेरा बड़ा जितने भी प्रोजेक्ट्स होता है 1/3 आई एम कीपिंग इट इनटू कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग. So right now for ATREE, we are getting one big program for restoration, multifunctional landscape. So almost out of $5 million, $1 million we have kept for capacity building. And capacity building, people, see, we cannot be very much this thing. So we should have national capacity building. So 6 PhD competitive from national level, 10 MSc competitive through ATREE Academy, and 40 MSc dissertations from the Himalayan universities. So you can see people from the Himalayan also has to get capacity building, but not neglecting the national need and national requirement. So this has to, the policy, things have to come like this. And apart from that, these are the formal education. But you will see about 150 or 200, the local youth leaders are engaged for 4 to 5 years. To do on OECM, other OEC means community conserved, other means of conservation by the communities extent. So for that we are empowering local youths. So capacity building is fundamental in my opinion. That is what I have observed in 43 years. We can do wonders in research findings. We can make wonderful policy decisions, but the actions doesn't go on the ground.
इधर भी. हाँ, आपने एक तो एडवोकेसी की ग्लोबल इन्वेस्टमेंट के लिए, पर फॉर व्हाट, ग्लोबल इन्वेस्टमेंट फॉर व्हाट. दूसरा मैं ये जानना चाहूँगा कि वहाँ जो लोकल कम्युनिटी है या वहाँ के स्थानीय लोग हैं, वो उनके क्या एफर्ट्स हैं, क्या उनका कोई पार्टिसिपेशन है इसको हिमालयन डिजास्टर हो रहा है उसको रोकने में।
ओके ओके आई थिंक फर्स्ट वन मैं बोलता हूँ कि इन्वेस्टमेंट फॉर व्हाट, इन्वेस्टमेंट फॉर बिल्डिंग रेजिलियंस। तो मैं क्या बोल रहा हूँ कि मैंने बायोडाइवर्सिटी का आपको बोला, इन्वेस्टमेंट फॉर रिसर्च, गेटिंग न्यू जितने भी डिस्कवरी हो रहा है उसका, बायोडाइवर्सिटी का यूसेस, एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप डेवलपमेंट, मैंने आपको यारसा गुम्बा कॉर्डिसेप्स हाई वैल्यू का दिखाया, उसका उस तरह के बहुत से ग्रीन प्रोडक्ट्स है, नेचर बेस्ड प्रोडक्ट्स हैं, उस प्रोडक्ट्स को बढ़ाने के लिए इन्वेस्टमेंट चाहिए। डेफिनेटली इन्वेस्टमेंट चाहिए आपका रिसर्च के लिए। जो हाई एल्टीट्यूड एरिया में मॉनिटरिंग ही नहीं हो रहा है, हमारे रिसर्च इंस्टीट्यूशंस के पास इनफ रिसोर्सेस नहीं है मॉनिटरिंग सिस्टम्स लगाने के लिए, उसके लिए चाहिए इन्वेस्टमेंट चाहिए। हमारे हिमालय में जो लोग हैं उनका लाइवलीहुड्स एनहांस करने के लिए चाहिए, ताकि उनका डिपेंडेंस ऑन नेचर रिसोर्सेस को ठीक स्तर पे रखें। तो इन्वेस्टमेंट सब सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से, मैं ये इन्वेस्टमेंट नहीं मांग रहा हूँ कि आप पैसा लाइए बड़े डैम मंगाइए बनाइए। सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट्स का टेनेंट्स मैंने जितना भी बताया उसके लिए आप ले आइए, डिफरेंट लेवल्स के हैं। तो एक तो ये हुआ कम्युनिटीज़, ऑफ कोर्स हिमालयन कम्युनिटीज़ में बहुत से, मैं एग्जाम्पल के बहुत दे सकता हूँ, लेकिन एक छोटा सा एग्जाम्पल देता हूँ जो एकदम, मैं जब जीबी पंत इंस्टीट्यूट में 1995 से मैंने एक यूएसएड का प्रोजेक्ट सिक्किम बायोडाइवर्सिटी इको टूरिज्म में रखा, उसमें अगेन वन पार्ट वाज हाउ टू एंगेज लोकल कम्युनिटीज़। उसमें एक पार्ट था रिसर्च जिसमें हमारे पीएचडी स्टूडेंट किया, दूसरा था लोकल कैपेसिटी, लोकल प्रोडक्ट ऑन इको टूरिज्म। वी वर टेस्टिंग a hypothesis how local communities, if the entrepreneurship is developed, they can really contribute to conservation. So equity, enterprise-based community engage conservation. That was the global hypothesis from USAID, BC and Biodiversity Conservation Network, and we were one of the. उसमें हमने नेपाल से भी लोग आके पोर्टर्स बनते थे, उसमें नेपाल से भी आके लोग जो है कि बिना ट्रेनिंग के कुक्स बनते थे, लोकल कम्युनिटी। लेकिन वहाँ के लोकल कम्युनिटी को ट्रेनिंग किया, उन लोगों को लाइसेंस दिया सब कुछ, एंड दे वर ट्रेंड सो मच एंड मेड सो मच अवेयर कि एक हमने जब वो प्रोजेक्ट कंप्लीट किया था, ऑलमोस्ट कंप्लीट हो रहा था, एक दिन पता चला चीफ मिनिस्टर के ऑफिस से 6 journalists, they went from Calcutta to Yoksam, and from there they trekked to the mountains to Jongri, and one of our person who were trained was the porter and cook for them. All of a sudden weather became uncertain and started snowing, and it was snowing so much कि वहाँ पे रहना बहुत मुश्किल हो गया, and the firewood was totally banned by the project, by the people, by these people, and those 6 journalists, they wanted rhododendrons to be cut and burned so that they are safe all night, and this person denied. The person who was trained, he said, if I cut like this, the weather is like this throughout the year, it can change any time, our forests will go and who will come? Our whole livelihoods, our nature, everything will be destroyed. He was educated, a porter was educated like that. And he was offered 600 rupees. Rhododendron raw, if you cut, it has high flavonoids, it's highly inflammable, you don't have to dry, it will burn. So he would have done that, but he didn't do that. After that, these journalists, they wrote to the President of India and copies sent to the Chief Minister, if somebody wants to see conservation by local communities happening in the Himalayas, they should go to Sikkim. So communities are actually doing, if they are given skills, if they are given opportunities, I think they are in the forefront of conservation.
Last 2 questions.
Yeah.
You talked of monitoring and the importance of monitoring. So what about the traditional knowledge systems, like they can also help a lot in monitoring, like the bird behavior, the plant behavior, animals, and all. So have these been tapped in monitoring of the fragile Himalayan environment?
Yeah, it is very, very nice question. What I was showing was very technical monitoring by high altitude areas, but we have also many other monitoring where communities are engaged very much. One example is actually in ATREE also we are doing citizen science. And for birds and like that, we have an app. And we are training people all across the Eastern Himalayan region. And those young people, then they are so in that, and they get also lots of numbers. And so they are putting the data right on the ground. So local people are trained to put the data through citizen science in this. So there are systems available, they have to be expanded. And we are expanding that very much wherever it is possible. But monitoring has to be very thematic oriented. So this is for bird. If it has to be glaciers, it is very technical. If it has to be glacial lake monitoring on the ground, the local communities in high altitude areas, they are grazing there, they are visiting there, so they should be engaged. So when I say monitoring, it has to be at different scales, different types, different levels. There is one, yeah.
So what I could gather from your very brilliant explanation around the energy, that we are suffering from the dilemma of the power bracket energy, policy and poverty.
I did.
Power, that is the energy sector,
Yeah.
policy sector, and the poverty.
Yeah. So what I was trying to say, the Himalaya, we are saying, projecting, if you look at, let me talk about the power overall in India. So we are coal-based thermal power is one of the major source, which is a big polluter. And as per 2015 agreement, 1.5 degree, we have to start cutting down. So what are the alternatives? In that alternative, we have to see hydropower is a safe energy. So if we have safe energy in terms of pollution, then hydropower. But if it is too big and it is not good for the Himalaya, then I am not advocating for that. But small is beautiful, the one which can be manageable. One, see Tista, which I showed you, what is the problem, it happened last year. But because of one Tista, many hydropowers, because of the dams, the river bed has gone up 10 feet, 15 feet, many places. And this year, even in little bit of rainfall, again flooded. And I didn't have much time. In high altitude areas, the threatening part of the climate change is permafrost depletion. What is permafrost? It's the ice, frozen ice with the rocks, with the high altitude soils which used to bind. If that is gone, then all debris are going to come to the rivers and you'll have floods and floods and floods. So that is the problem. So in that situation, is hydropower a big, should we advocate? We should go for small hydropowers and then try to see there are alternatives, see. So now we are talking about green hydrogen. We are talking about solar. We are talking about wind. There are many other options. Hydropower is one, but I am not advocating for hydropower. Hydropower is an option, but not in a big way.
Last question, sir. Last question.
गुड इवनिंग सर जैसा आप जानते हैं सर ब्रह्मपुत्र रिवर जो है सर उस रिवर का जो मेजर पार्ट है सर वो चाइना में है एंड देन सर वो हमारे इंडिया में डेवलप होती है सर चाइना में इतने सारे डैम बना रहा है सर चाइना एक के बाद एक डैम बना रहा है सर जिसकी वजह से जो हमारा इंडियन पार्ट है वो अफेक्ट हो रहा है सर तो हम उससे कैसे डील करें
तो एक तो बता देते हैं ब्रह्मपुत्र जो है ना निकलता है आपका उत्तराखंड और वेस्टर्न नेपाल के थोड़ा ऊपर कैलाश रीजन है और कैलाश रीजन में मानसरोवर भी है और उसी के पास से इंदस सतलज काली और ब्रह्मपुत्र निकलता है और ब्रह्मपुत्र वहाँ से करीब 1500 किलोमीटर आप ईस्टवर्ड जाता है वो टिबेटन प्लाटो में जाता है और जो ग्लेशियर मेल्ट है वो ऑन द वे भी जितने भी स्नो और ग्लेशियर मेल्ट वो फीड करता रहता है तो लेकिन वो वाटर जो फीड होता है वो 20 to 30% ही है। ज़्यादा पानी हमारा वाटरशेड में जो बारिश से आता है ईस्टर्न हिमालयन रीजन में वहाँ से फीड होता है। तो एज फार एज पानी का अमाउंट वॉल्यूम इज़ कंसर्न वो लीन पीरियड में हमको थोड़ा सा अफेक्ट कर सकता है लेकिन ज़्यादा नहीं। अब जो डैम वो लोग बना रहे हैं वो अगर डैम बना के पूरा पानी जो है कि आपका डाइवर्ट कर दिए वो तिकोना जो अरुणाचल में घुसने से पहले लगभग 2500 मीटर का वो फॉल है कितना किलोमीटर में इतना वो आता है तो दैट इज़ ए big opportunity for them. They don't have to create gravitational thing. They already have 2,500 meters water का depth. तो वो डैम बनाएंगे तो उनको वो फायदा है, definitely कम खर्च में बहुत ज़्यादा energy मिलेगा. So they are seeing their economic benefit. They are not seeing what India will happen. But I am not so much worried. It is not a big amount of water. I think we should be able to manage our own water, our watersheds in Arunachal Pradesh, in northeast India. The main worry is for Bangladesh. If Brahmaputra is totally flooded and like that, Brahmaputra is further downstream. They are going to, Bangladesh is going to have a huge problem. So for India, if you see, from our point of view, our watersheds, our ground table water would be quite sufficient. But for politically, if you see, if some other country is damming and not allowing water, then that is a big question that has to be negotiated. We cannot, as a science, very much when I look into, it will have impact, of course, but not to the level of what people are saying. It will have less impact because our source of our water is more watersheds. I have shown you for agriculture, so same with for your rivers.
Please.
I have two questions. One is that when government invests, it is mostly with the idea of getting maximum benefit to the maximum number of people. So like you showed in your slide that the population is there, but when you compare the population with the population of say Delhi or Mumbai, etc., the investment, government would like to invest more in urbanization. So, and you yourself said that the population pressure on the Himalayas is increasing. So, won't it be a very good, it could be a possible solution that we actually do not encourage people to stay in high altitudes, and gradually we can hope that with civilization progressing and people becoming educated, they would want to migrate to urban areas, and government invest more in making our cities much better, so that the Himalayas are left to just grow forests and with very little population and no pressure there, so they can sustain themselves, and very few people will remain, which government can just compensate by giving that subsidies you said. Which is peanuts actually. Sir said there that what do you need the global investment for? So actually global investment for one huge dam is many times what it requires for that just a little bit of subsidy to people to continue staying there. So can we not focus on that? That was one question.
Okay. I think many people might think like that, but actually if you see, traditional people won't, even if they leave, they would not leave their land. Traditionally, Himalaya is a seat of culture. It's abode of God, they say, many places. People have relationship. Even they go, it's a temporary, they have link, number one. So it is not easy, as you are saying. Number two, if I look at environmentally, if there is no human interaction with nature, the nature also gets spoiled. Just go to Darjeeling and then go to Sinchel area, Sinchel Wildlife Sanctuary. One bamboo species, native species, local species has become an invasive species. Whole slope is just bamboo. Beautiful trees, everything which we used to have, that's gone. Now in restoration we are trying to control bamboo. Because there is no human interaction, it is happening. So our quality of forest, see what Himalaya is giving. I said only 240 million people live, but 1.9 billion people are depending on that 240 million people. Let those 240 million people give, and let's give alternative livelihoods to them, better livelihoods to them, so that there is a balance between nature and people. I think that is more important, because there has to be checks and balances. If grazing is stopped in Sikkim, the quality of forest of stopping grazing has really impacted, and people can see it very much. People, even tourism, that area is totally not possible. So you can see, I think we cannot stop people. They have been there, and generations have been there, evolution has been there. So there is a history, but we have to do in a good way. So I think total migrating out people from the Himalaya is not a solution, in my opinion. I think I am supposed to wind up. Thank you very much, and I would like to thank Dr. Nandi and team and all of you for a wonderful interaction. Thank you very much.